The stars of the Zelari homeworld shone bright as Captain Elias Kane stepped out of the human envoy ship. His boots touched the smooth silver floor of the landing dock, and for a moment he felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on his shoulders. Behind him, banners of Earth's United Council fluttered in the artificial breeze, but Kane knew they carried little meaning here. The Zelari Empire had ruled the stars long before humans had even dreamed of leaving their world. Now, after decades of mistrust, humans had been invited to a peace summit, and Kane was chosen to represent them. He looked around. Towering spires of crystal rose into the sky, glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air was cool, carrying a faint hum as if the city itself was alive. Everywhere he looked, Zelari guards stood tall in gleaming armor, their slender forms radiating grace and authority. Their eyes, bright with inner light, followed every human step. Kane could feel the tension. To them, humans were newcomers, too bold, too wild, too unpredictable. Inside the grand hall, the air felt even heavier. A long chamber stretched ahead, its ceiling carved with constellations. At the far end sat Queen Serenia of the Zelari. Her presence commanded the room without a word. She wore robes woven with threads that shimmered like starlight, and a crown of crystal rested gently on her brow. Her eyes, glowing with calm silver light, studied the humans as they approached. To Kane, she looked less like a ruler and more like a living symbol of her people's power. The other human delegates walked stiffly, their faces proud, their voices sharp as they spoke to the Zelari Council members. Kane listened as they argued about trade routes, defense agreements, and disputed territories. He could already sense the walls rising higher between both sides. Every word felt like a spark waiting to ignite. The Zelari Council responded with cold logic, showing no interest in compromise. Kane feared the summit would collapse before it even began. When his turn came to speak, Kane stepped forward. His voice was calm but steady. He did not talk of power or demands. Instead, he spoke of what humans had learned from struggle, how they had once been divided but found strength in unity, how they had faced hardships yet continued to rise. His words did not follow the rehearsed script the council had prepared for him. They came from his heart, and he hoped they would at least be heard. Queen Serenia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing in quiet thought. For the first time since the summit began, she raised her hand, silencing both her council and the human delegates. She asked Kane a question, simple but sharp: why should the Zelari trust humans, when history shows they often trust only themselves? The hall grew silent. Kane felt dozens of eyes on him, waiting for him to stumble. He thought carefully before answering. Because trust is not built on what we were yesterday, he said. It is built on what we choose to be today. If humanity is given the chance, we will prove we are not here to conquer or take. We are here to stand as equals, to learn as much as we share. The words echoed softly through the chamber. Some Zelari scoffed, others whispered, but Serenia did not speak again. Instead, she studied him with a look that seemed half curiosity, half challenge. When the council dismissed the gathering for the day, Kane caught one last glimpse of the queen. For a moment, he thought he saw the faintest smile cross her lips, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. That night, Kane walked along the crystalline streets of the Zelari capital. He watched the way their cities glowed, powered by energies humanity barely understood. He also saw the way the people moved, disciplined, graceful, yet distant, as if bound by invisible chains of tradition. He thought about the queen's question and her steady gaze. She had not dismissed him outright. That alone gave him hope. But hope was fragile here. One wrong word, One wrong step could shatter the truce before it had the chance to grow. Cain knew the days ahead would not be easy. The Zilari saw humanity as reckless children. The humans saw the Zilari as proud rulers unwilling to change. And yet, between those two walls of mistrust, there had been a small opening, a spark that might become more. As he looked up at the alien stars, Cain promised himself that he would not let this chance slip away. Humanity's place in the galaxy depended on it. More than that, he felt there was something in Queen Serenya's eyes, something unspoken that told him this story was only beginning. The summit entered its second day, and the atmosphere grew heavier. The long chamber once again filled with voices from both sides, each group speaking in proud tones that left no room for understanding. Human delegates argued that trade routes should be shared, while the Zilari Council responded with rules that left little space for compromise. Every sentence sounded like a wall being built higher, and Captain Elias Cain felt the gap between the two worlds widening. He sat quietly, listening, his eyes moving from face to face. The human representatives spoke with passion, but their passion often sounded like impatience. The Zilari spoke with logic, but their logic often sounded like dismissal. Cain could feel the tension rising like a storm that had no sky to escape into. He thought of Earth's hope resting on these meetings, and for the first time, he worried that peace might never be more than a dream. Queen Serenya sat on her crystal throne, her expression calm yet unreadable. She let her council speak, but she watched Cain more often than she let on. She had noticed something different in him during the first session, something she could not explain. While the other humans pushed, Cain had spoken with honesty. He had not demanded, he had simply offered. That was rare in her experience with outsiders. When the council paused for a recess, Serenya surprised everyone. She stood and announced that Captain Cain would walk with her in the royal gardens. The room fell silent. No human had ever been given such an invitation. Some Zilari whispered warnings, while some humans exchanged worried glances. But Serenya's word was law, and Cain followed her through tall archways into a world of light and crystal. The gardens were unlike anything Cain had seen. Trees with silver leaves swayed in a breeze that carried soft music, as if the air itself sang. Flowers glowed with colors he had no names for, and streams of liquid light ran between stone paths. The beauty was overwhelming, yet it felt carefully arranged, as if nature itself had been disciplined to obey. "You look troubled, Captain," Serenya said as they walked. Her voice was calm, her silver eyes reflecting the soft lights of the garden. Cain chose his words with care. "I worry that we are speaking, but not listening. Both sides want peace, yet both sides are afraid of being the one who gives more. Fear is louder than hope right now." Serenya's lips curved slightly, not into a smile but into something close. "You see clearly. Too clearly for a human, some might say. Your people often rush into action. Yet you speak as if you have learned patience." "Perhaps," Cain replied. "But patience alone cannot build peace. Understanding must walk beside it." For a long moment, they walked in silence. Serenya studied him, searching for weakness or pride. Instead, she found something unusual. He spoke as if he believed his words, not as if he wished to win a debate. That was rare, even among her own people. Finally, she asked, "Tell me about Earth. Not your council's words. Your own." Cain paused, looking at the glowing trees around them. "Earth is full of struggle. We fought ourselves for centuries before we looked to the stars. We are still learning unity. Sometimes we fail, but when we succeed, it is because we remember that every person has value. We do not always honor that truth, but we keep trying. Perhaps that is what makes us human. Serenya listened, her expression softening. The Zilari know unity, but we do not know freedom. Our traditions are chains, beautiful but heavy. My people obey because they are taught there is no other way. They look at humanity and see chaos, but I look and see something else, possibility. Her words lingered in the air, fragile yet powerful. Cain realized then that the queen herself carried a burden. She was not only a ruler but also a prisoner of her own traditions. Perhaps that was why she looked at him with such curiosity, because he represented something her own people could not give her. Before they returned to the council chamber, Serenya stopped and faced him. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Captain, what you said yesterday still echoes in me. Trust is not built on what we were yesterday. I wonder if my council is ready to hear such words. But I am listening." Cain bowed his head slightly. "That is all I could ask, Your Majesty." When they re-entered the chamber, both humans and Zilari noticed a change. The queen's eyes carried a quiet glow, and Cain's steps seemed steadier than before. Nothing had been agreed upon, yet something invisible had shifted. It was not a treaty or a contract. It was a bridge, thin, delicate, and easily broken, but it was there. And though neither side knew it yet, that bridge would soon be tested by storms greater than either world had ever faced. The peace summit continued into its third day, but the hall no longer felt calm. The human delegates pressed harder with their demands, while the Zilari council grew colder in their answers. Captain Elias Cain tried to keep his words steady, yet he could sense the ground slipping beneath them. Every hour that passed felt like another stone falling from the fragile bridge of trust he had begun to build with Queen Serenya. It was during one such tense exchange that the chamber doors opened with sudden force. A Zilari officer hurried forward, his face pale, his armor carrying the marks of urgent travel. He bowed deeply before the queen and spoke in a voice that trembled with alarm. "Your Majesty, a message from the frontier. Colonies are burning. The ancient machines have awakened." A hush fell over the entire hall. Even the proud voices of the human delegates fell silent. Cain leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He had read old reports of these machines, relics of a forgotten war, left drifting in dark space. They were said to be lifeless husks, but every few generations, whispers told of fleets that stirred without warning, destroying anything in their path. Many dismissed them as myths. Now, that myth was real. Queen Serenya stood slowly, her silver eyes glowing with a sharp light. "Where?" she asked. The officer answered, "The Ashen Void, Majesty. 3 Zilari colonies have already fallen. The machines strike without mercy, without warning, without pattern. Our fleets are moving, but they are unprepared. And, human outposts lie in their path as well." The human delegates erupted in argument. Some accused the Zilari of unleashing the machines to force Earth into submission. Others shouted that this was proof of why humanity should never trust alien power. The Zilari Council responded with equal fire, blaming humans for stirring the void with reckless explorations. The chamber became a storm of voices, anger clashing against fear. Amid the noise, Cain rose to his feet. His voice cut through the arguments, firm and steady. "Enough. Machines do not care who began this. They will not stop at Zilari borders. They will not stop at human colonies. If we waste time blaming each other, both our people will be lost." The chamber quieted, though not fully. Many eyes turned to him, some with doubt, others with curiosity. Cain felt the weight of their stares, but he pressed on. We must fight together. One fleet, one purpose. Only united do we have a chance. His words hung in the air, bold and dangerous. Human leaders frowned. Xilari counselors whispered to each other in alarm. Unity was not what either side wanted, unity meant trust, and trust was fragile. Yet Cain saw Serenya's gaze on him, sharp but thoughtful. She raised her hand, silencing the room. Captain Cain speaks with courage, she said. I will consider his proposal. Her counselors immediately objected, their voices echoing through the chamber. Majesty, the Xilari do not fight beside outsiders. Our fleets are sacred. To share command is unthinkable. But Serenya's voice remained calm. Unthinkable, perhaps. Necessary, certainly. These machines are no enemy we know. They do not bargain. They do not surrender. If humans and Xilari stand apart, they will fall apart. For the first time, Cain saw hesitation in her council. They were proud, yes, but even pride could not blind them to the danger. And deep within, Cain felt a quiet relief. Serenya was not only listening, she was willing to risk her own authority for what she believed was right. After hours of tense debate, the summit ended with no treaty, no agreement on trade or borders. But a decision had been made. A joint fleet would be assembled. Humans and Xilari, side by side, would meet the machines in battle. It was not peace, but it was survival. Sometimes, Cain thought, survival was the seed from which peace could grow. That evening, Cain stood on the balcony of his guest chamber, looking out at the glowing spires of the Xilari capital. The stars stretched far beyond, and somewhere among them lay the ashen void, now alive with the threat of war. He thought of Earth's colonies, small and fragile, standing in the path of destruction. He thought of the Queen's calm voice, the way she had silenced her council to give his words weight. For reasons he could not yet name, he trusted her. In the distance, a bell-like sound rang through the city, marking the night's arrival. Cain felt the cool air brush against his face and whispered to himself, "This is the moment. Either we fight as one, or we fall as many." Unseen by him, in her own tower, Queen Serenya stood at her window as well. Her thoughts echoed his. She knew her decision would bring resistance from her people, but she also knew the truth: without unity, the Xilari would not survive. And perhaps, just perhaps, this human captain was the bridge fate had sent her. The united fleet moved slowly through the silence of space, leaving behind the bright stars of the Xilari capital. Ahead of them stretched the ashen void, a region where no light reached, filled with drifting ruins of ancient wars. Broken ships, shattered stations, and fragments of long-dead worlds floated endlessly, creating a graveyard of history. It was here that the machines had awakened, rising from their slumber like shadows given life. Captain Elias Cain stood on the command deck of the human flagship Resolute. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the viewport, but there was little to see, only black space and the faint outlines of wreckage. Around him, his crew worked with tense focus, their voices steady but their hands quick. They all knew what was waiting for them out there. On the far side of the fleet, the Grand Xilari flagship Eternal Light drifted with calm grace, its crystalline surface glowing faintly in the void. Inside that ship, Queen Serenya commanded her people, her presence as steady as the stars themselves. Through secure channels, Cain and Serenya exchanged words, short but important, planning each step of their approach. The fleet moved as one, human steel beside Xilari crystal, a sight no one in the galaxy had ever witnessed before. Soldiers whispered of history being made, though most were too busy readying weapons and shields to think of glory. Fear was stronger than hope in that moment. Then, without warning, the machines appeared. They did not come with sound or signal. They came as shadows, their ships rising from the wreckage like ghosts. Cold, sharp forms of black metal spread across the void, their surfaces glinting with strange green light. There was no order in their movement, yet no chaos either. They moved as if guided by one mind, flowing together like a tide of steel. Alarms rang across the fleet. Orders were shouted. Kane tightened his grip on the command rail. All ships, defensive formation. Protect the Xilari flagship at all costs. The machines struck first. Streams of energy ripped through the void, cutting into human cruisers, breaking shields with merciless speed. Xilari ships responded with beams of white light, precise and graceful, slicing through enemy formations. Human cannons roared with fire and thunder, tearing holes into the tide of metal. The void became alive with war. Kane's Resolute fought fiercely, darting between wreckage fields, shielding smaller ships with its heavier armor. His voice carried across the comms, steady and unshaken. Stay together. Watch your flanks. Remember, we are not two fleets. We are one. For a time, the battle seemed balanced, but the machines were endless. For every one destroyed, two more seemed to rise from the void. Slowly, the human Xilari line began to bend under the pressure. A piercing alarm sounded across Kane's deck. His heart froze as he read the signal: the Eternal Light was under direct assault. Through the viewport, Kane saw the Xilari flagship surrounded by swarms of machine ships. Its shields flickered, its graceful form battered by wave after wave of fire. If the Queen's ship fell, the Unity would die with it. Bring us in close, Kane ordered. His crew stared at him in shock. To dive into that storm was near suicide. Yet his voice left no space for doubt. Now. The Resolute turned sharply, engines blazing, rushing into the heart of the machine swarm. Its cannons fired non-stop, blasting openings in the enemy ranks. The ship shuddered with each strike it took, but it pressed forward, placing itself directly between the Eternal Light and the machines. Explosions tore across its hull. Warnings filled the command deck. The shields began to collapse. Kane gripped the rail tighter, his voice calm even as sparks flew around him. Hold the line. If we fall protecting them. In that desperate moment, the Xilari saw what humanity meant by sacrifice. A ship of steel and fire standing in the path of certain destruction, not for glory, but for another. Then, in a move that stunned her people, Queen Serenia herself entered the battle. She left her throne and boarded a fighter craft, leading a squadron into the fray. Her crystal ship glowed bright, cutting through machines with elegance and precision. She flew beside Kane's burning vessel, refusing to let it stand alone. Together, human and queen pushed back the tide. Their fleets rallied, inspired by what they witnessed. With united fire, they broke the machine swarm and forced it to retreat deeper into the void. When the battle ended, silence filled the stars once more. The Resolute was crippled, its hull torn, its engines failing. Kane's voice was faint but steady over the comms. The Queen is safe. That is enough. Serenia's fighter docked with the human flagship. Against her council's protests, she stepped aboard the wounded vessel herself. She found Kane in the smoke-filled command deck, weary but alive. For a brief moment, their eyes met. No words were needed. She had seen his courage, and he had seen hers. And in that silence, something deeper than alliance began to take root. The Battle of Ashen Void was over, but its shadow lingered across the galaxy. The human ship Resolute limped back to safer space, escorted by Zelari guardians. The United Fleet had survived, yet the cost was heavy. Many ships lay broken, countless lives had been lost, and still the machine threat was far from destroyed. For both humans and Zelari, the memory of that battle would not fade quickly. In the grand halls of the Zelari capital, Queen Serenia faced her council. They stood tall in their gleaming robes, their voices sharp and accusing. "Majesty," one elder declared, "you risked your life for a reckless human captain. You entered battle as if you were a soldier, not a queen. Such actions weaken the crown." Another spoke with equal force. "The Zelari have always stood above outsiders. To place our fleet beside theirs is dangerous. To place yourself beside him is worse." Serenia listened in silence, her silver eyes steady. Inside, however, her heart wrestled with conflict. She remembered the sight of the Resolute standing in the path of destruction, shielding her ship without hesitation. She remembered Kane's voice, calm even as fire tore through his vessel. He had not spoken of treaties or power. He had spoken only of protecting another. That memory was stronger than any argument her council gave. But tradition bound her tightly. The Zelari crown was not hers alone. It was a symbol of her people's pride, their long history of unity and order. To change course was to risk breaking that order. She felt the weight of her ancestors pressing on her shoulders. Could she defy them? Should she? Meanwhile, in a quiet chamber across the city, Kane recovered from his wounds. His body bore the marks of battle, but his spirit remained strong. Human delegates visited him, offering words that carried both praise and warning. "You showed bravery," one said, "but you also showed foolishness. Protecting an alien queen with human lives? Do you realize how it looks to our people?" Another added, "The Zelari may admire you, but Earth will not trust one who bows so easily to their crown. Be careful, Captain. Your duty is to humanity, not to her." Kane listened, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered the Queen's eyes when she stepped into the battle herself, the way she fought beside him. He thought of her words in the gardens, about freedom and the chains of tradition. He realized that Serenia was not only a queen but also a person longing for something beyond the weight of her crown. Days passed, and whispers spread across both civilizations. Some Zelari citizens admired the bravery of the human captain who had shielded their queen. Others called him reckless and unworthy. Among humans, some saw hope in unity with the Zelari, while others feared losing their independence to alien power. The galaxy seemed divided, and Kane and Serenia stood at the center of that storm. One evening, Serenia invited Kane to a private meeting in the Royal Observatory. The chamber's ceiling opened to the stars, allowing the night sky to stretch endlessly above them. The air was still, filled only with the soft hum of distant energy currents. "You are quiet," Serenia said as she approached him. "I am thinking," Kane answered. "Your council does not trust me. My own leaders do not trust you. Yet the machines will not wait for trust to grow. They will strike again, stronger than before. If we remain divided, we will lose." Serenia's voice was calm, yet there was a trace of sorrow in it. "You speak truth, but truth is not always enough. My people see me as a guardian of tradition. They will not accept what they cannot understand." Kane looked at her, his voice steady. "Then give them something they cannot deny. Not tradition. Not fear. Something greater." Her silver eyes searched his face. "And what would that be?" He hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. Hope. If they see hope in us, true hope, they may begin to believe. For a moment, neither spoke. The stars above seemed to listen, shining cold and bright. Serenya felt her heart tremble, though her face remained calm. She had always believed duty was her path, that her life belonged to her people, not to herself. Yet here stood a human, reckless yet honest, offering her something no counselor ever had, the vision of another way. As they stood together under the stars, Serenya realized her dilemma was no longer about politics alone. It was about choice. Would she continue as the queen bound by tradition, or would she step forward as a leader who dared to change the future? For now, she gave no answer. But deep within her, the decision slowly began to form. The warnings came sooner than expected. Scouts from both human and Xelari fleets returned with grim news: the machines were not retreating into silence as before. They had gathered, grown stronger, and now a massive wave was moving across the stars. This time their path was clear, and it led straight toward Earth and the Xelari homeworld. Panic spread quickly. Human leaders called emergency councils, demanding stronger defenses. Xelari nobles gathered in their towers, pressing the queen to fortify their own borders and abandon outsiders to their fate. Both sides feared what was coming, yet both still hesitated to place full trust in the other. In the great war chamber of the Xelari capital, the leaders of both civilizations met once more. The chamber glowed with crystal light, maps of stars projected above the council table. Red lines marked the machine's advance, spreading like fire through the dark. Voices clashed louder than ever. Humans demanded joint command. Xelari resisted, unwilling to share power. Amid the storm of arguments, Captain Elias Kane stood silently. He listened to every word, feeling the weight of failure pressing close. He knew the machines could not be stopped by half measures. He knew that divided voices would not survive the tide. And as his eyes fell upon Queen Serenya, sitting calm yet surrounded by the doubts of her council, an idea came to him. A dangerous idea, but perhaps the only one. When the chamber grew quiet for a breath, Kane stepped forward. His boots echoed across the floor, drawing every eye. He walked until he stood at the center, between humans and Xelari, and then he turned toward the queen. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady, "we stand at the edge of the greatest battle either of our peoples has ever faced. The machines do not care for borders. They do not care for crowns or councils. They will destroy us all, unless we show them something stronger than fear. We must be more than allies. We must be one." The hall grew still. Kane's next action shocked every witness. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee before Queen Serenya. His hand pressed to his chest, his eyes never leaving hers. "Serenya, Queen of the Xelari, I make not a treaty, but a proposal. Let us unite our people not with words on paper, but with a bond no council can deny. Stand with me, not only as an ally, but as a partner. If you take my hand, we give the galaxy a symbol that cannot be broken." Gasps filled the chamber. Human delegates whispered in alarm, Xelari nobles shouted in disbelief. A union between species? Between their queen and a human captain? It was unthinkable, yet it had been spoken aloud, and the words could not be taken back. For a long moment, silence reigned. Serenya's silver eyes studied Kane, searching his face. She saw no trick, no ambition for power, only the steady light of conviction. He had risked everything in Ashen Void for her. He had spoken honestly in gardens and chambers alike. And now, before the eyes of both civilizations, he risked his honor again, kneeling not as a conqueror, but as a man offering trust. The council erupted in protests. "Majesty, this cannot be," cried one elder. "It breaks tradition," shouted another. Human leaders demanded Cain withdraw his words. But Serenya raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent once more. Her gaze softened, and for the first time in her reign, she allowed a true smile to grace her lips. She rose from her crystal throne, the starlight crown shining faintly, and she stepped down the stairs until she stood before Cain. "You ask much, Captain," she said, her voice calm yet warm. "You ask me to break with centuries of tradition, to risk all that I am for a path untried. And yet," she reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "You also offer me what no one else has dared, a chance to choose hope over fear." The chamber held its breath. Then Serenya's hand closed over his, her smile deepening with quiet strength. "Is this your proposal?" she asked softly. Cain's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. "It is." Her silver eyes glowed brighter. "Then I accept." "I do." The words echoed like a bell across the chamber, simple yet impossible to ignore. Protests turned to silence. Doubts turned to awe. In that moment, something greater than politics had been born. The Queen and the Captain stood together, their hands joined, their voices united. It was not a treaty. It was not a bargain. It was a promise, one that would carry both humanity and the Zilari into the coming storm. And for the first time since the machines had awakened, hope spread faster than fear. The final wave of machines came with a speed and force unlike any before. The stars of the Ashen Void seemed to shiver under their approach. Human and Zilari fleets prepared for battle, side by side, their crews tense but determined. This time, there was no hesitation. The bond between the two species, symbolized by the union of Captain Elias Cain and Queen Serenya, had given them courage stronger than fear. On the command deck of the Resolute, Cain stood beside Serenya, both of them gazing at the approaching threat. He felt the weight of both civilizations upon him, yet he also felt something lighter: hope. They had risked everything not only for survival, but for unity. Now, that unity would be tested. "Coordinates set for the heart of their formation," Cain said, pointing to the glowing projection above the deck. "If we strike here, we can break their command core. It will not be easy, and many may not return, but it is our best chance." Serenya nodded. "Our fleets will follow your lead, Elias. Together, we fight as one." The fleet surged forward, human steel and Zilari crystal moving in perfect coordination. Ships that had once been strangers now operated as a single force, their movements precise, their fire synchronized. Across comm channels, the crews shouted encouragement, their voices blending into a chorus of determination. The machine army awaited them, an endless wall of black metal and green light. It rose from the void like a living shadow, its energy pulsing with cold intelligence. Cannons fired, energy shields shimmered, and ships exploded into sparks and fragments. The void became alive with fire and motion, yet the human Zilari line did not falter. Cain's squadron dove into the center of the swarm, his flagship taking fire to protect smaller ships. Sparks flew across the deck, alarms blared, but his focus remained unbroken. "Steady," he called. "Watch your flanks. Trust each other." Beside him, Serenya's crystalline vessel glided through the chaos, cutting through enemy formations with elegant precision. Her presence inspired both fleets, reminding them that courage was stronger than fear, and unity stronger than division. Hours passed, the battle raging across the void. For every machine destroyed, another seemed to rise, relentless in its pursuit. Yet humanity and the Xelari fought with a determination that neither the Council nor the ancient texts could have predicted. Ships fell, heroes were lost, but the fleets pressed forward, driven by the promise of survival and the hope that had been born between their leaders. At last, Kane saw an opening, a moment in the machine formation where their command core could be struck. He turned to Serenya. "Now," he said. In perfect synchronization, human and Xelari fire converged on the core. Energy beams lanced through the void, hitting the heart of the machine fleet. The command core exploded in a burst of green and white light, sending shock waves through the enemy ranks. Machines shattered into fragments, and the remaining forces scattered into the darkness. Silence returned to the void, broken only by the hum of damaged engines and the cheers of the surviving crews. Kane and Serenya looked at each other, their eyes meeting in shared relief. They had done it. Together, humans and Xelari had survived what none could face alone. When the fleets returned to their home systems, both civilizations celebrated not just the victory, but the bond that had made it possible. Humans were no longer outsiders, Xelari were no longer distant rulers. Together, they had learned the power of trust, courage, and unity. In the grand hall of the Xelari capital, Kane and Serenya stood before their people, hands joined. Both councils, human and Xelari, watched in awe. The queen spoke first, her voice calm but full of authority. "Today, we have survived not because of force alone, but because we chose hope over fear, trust over suspicion, and unity over pride." Kane stepped forward, his voice clear. "We proved that humanity is not defined by chaos or recklessness, but by courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand together. Together, we are stronger than any threat, no matter how ancient or powerful." The words echoed through the halls and across the stars, inspiring hope far beyond their fleets. Children on distant colonies would hear these stories. Future leaders would remember them. Humanity had earned respect across the galaxy, not through conquest, but through heroics, bravery, and the heart to bridge worlds. As the celebrations continued, Kane and Serenya stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. The stars stretched far into the distance, calm once more. The queen looked at the captain and smiled. "Elias," she said softly, "we did what many thought impossible. We united not just fleets, but hearts and worlds." Kane squeezed her hand gently. "And we will continue to. Together, there is no challenge we cannot face." Above them, the stars seemed brighter than ever, as if the galaxy itself celebrated the bond of two species who had chosen hope, heroism, and unity. In that moment, history was written, not with words alone, but with deeds that would never be forgotten. Humanity had proven its worth, not through power, but through courage, heart, and the willingness to stand with another. And so, two worlds became one, stronger, braver, and ready for whatever the stars would send next.